Hey guys, Jambre here. We're going to be reviewing some more cards today. I'm just going to be using my web browser to do it from now on. As more and more cards come out, these reviews have to come out a lot quicker as well, and it's just going to save a bit of time on the editing process. So yeah, let's get jumping into it. First of all, we have Bizarre Mugger, which is a rogue 5-drop, 3/5 rush, battlecry, add a random minion from another class to your hand. Right, so 5 mana for a 3/5 rush is a little bit understated. We see conditional 5/5 rush for warrior, which is good. So this is a bit slower than that. In terms of most road decks, I don't think this makes the cut. A random minion from another class is generally going to be pretty bad, tempo-wise. It might be a bunch of stats if you get like a legendary or something, but a lot of them have like conditional synergies, etc., etc. Class cards tend to be a bit stronger than neutrals, so it's got that going for it. But I think on average you're going to get a minion which you don't really want to be playing up before your other minions from your hand. One of the benefits of this card is that it works really well with Tess. When you play Tess, you really want to have a lot of minions in your pool when you do the resummon effect, because they're always going to be good. They're just a bunch of stats to go with Tess. Things like Eviscerate and things can hit your own stuff. They might not hit the right target, but minions can be a bunch of stats on board, and that's great. So this is guaranteed to pad out your Tess battlecry. Outside of Tess decks, I don't think it will see too much play. Why it's a fine card. I think Rogue has faster options available to them. Yeah, it's okay. Probably in test decks. Next we have Desert Obelisk. 5 mana 0/5. Oof. If you control 3 of these, at the end of your turn, deal 5 damage to a random enemy. So as long as you got 3 of these in play, each one turns into like a mini Ragnaros, if you like. So this card looks absolutely terrible at first glance, and if we dive a little bit deeper into it, it's still pretty terrible. I think this is just a meme card. Like you can build a deck for it, and it's probably not going to be too great. But when you do get the combo off, it's going to be really fun for you. A few ways you can do this. Rogue is probably one of the most obvious ones, where you can use Togwaggle's Scheme and Togwaggle himself. You play the Desert Obelisk, scheme a bunch of them into your deck, and then using Tog, you can use the 1 to draw 3 0-mana ones of these, and then you'll get the tempo that way. Or you can fill your hand with a bunch of these if you want to go really slow. Other classes, maybe Priest. They have Spirit of the Dead. I think that's what it's called. It's the 1 mana 0/3, which when a minion dies, you get a 1 mana copy of it in your deck. So you could play a couple of those spirits, and you play your Obelisk, and then maybe use Topsy Turvy on it, or Forbidden Words to kill it really cheaply and add a bunch to your deck. You draw them, and then you've got a bunch of 1 mana 0/5s you can combo with, etc., etc. There's a bunch of ways for this to work. I don't think it's going to be competitively viable, but I think it'll be quite a bit of fun to try and build a deck around this card. Yeah. Next we have Evil Recruiter. This is a 3 mana 3/3 for Warlock. Battlecry, destroy a friendly lackey to summon a 5/5 demon. So a lot of people are saying this card is absolutely nuts, and I agree with them. This is insane tempo if you're playing like a zoo deck. You're going to be generating lackeys from your Evil Genius card, and it's probably, if you're running this card, it's worth running extra generators like Evil Cable Rat, and who knows, whatever generators coming in the set. In terms of tempo, it's like insane. It's similar to like a 3 mana 7/7 worth of stats, spread out quite well for the mid game. You're losing obviously 1/1 in stats from killing your lackey, so it's not quite a 3 mana 8/8 in stats. This thing is probably going to help tremendously against something like Warrior. In the mid game, summoning a 3/3 and a 5/5 is really tough for them to deal with. They can use a militia commander to kill the 5/5, but they're always going to be falling behind his tempo. The 5/5 dodges things like Warpath and Dynamatic, something that Zoo kind of struggles with right now. So this is going to really help that matchup. It's just a bunch of tempo. Like if you're against Conjuring Mage, for example, you're just going to be putting so much stats onto the board that it's going to be really hard for them to deal with it. You can even start contesting things like Giants with this card. Obviously, if you don't have the Lackey, it's a bit tough. This card's obviously just a 3-mana 3/3, which is pretty bad. But Evil Genius generates 2 Lackeys per use of it. So it's very easy to be able to just hold on to one of them, or put one down on your turn 3 and threaten this card. It's going to make your opponent really want to kill Lackeys, which are only 1/1s. And with Zoo, you've got a bunch of higher stated minions, which they'd rather be trading into. This spreads out your threats, and it just gives the opponent a tougher time. I don't think this card will be that good in non-Zoo decks. It's mostly going to be in Zoo decks. It might be powerful enough that just a Lackey package makes into a mid-range Warlock, for example. But definitely a very, very strong card. It's going to help Zoo a tremendous amount, especially against like Warrior. Next up we have another Warlock card, Rift Cleaver. The 6-mana 7/5 Battlecry, destroy a minion. The hero takes damage equal to its health. So this card is basically the Lich King card, Obliterate on a stick. That card was 2 mana, destroy a minion, take damage equals to its health, which was okay in terms of the card. Sometimes you didn't really want to play it because you take too much damage. And when you're in Warlock, that's definitely a big deal. The fact that this costs 6 mana means it's kind of hard to do anything else with your turn. Obviously, if this card didn't have the downside, it would be absolutely nuts. 6 mana 7/5 is huge stats, very threatening. I think if you're against an aggro deck, or at least a deck with burn and stuff, this card might be too much of a downside for it to be good. Obviously, if the opponent plays like a huge Edwin, this isn't even that great on it. Like if you make an 8/8 and you use it, or use this card, you're still taking the 8 damage. Could be the best thing you got in that situation. I think Warlock needs some good heals cards to make this card good. But if they do have access to them, this card is going to be insanely powerful. It's just a huge tempo swing with a threat onto it. It probably makes more sense to run this card in a deck that's trying to push for tempo and push for lethal damage of their own rather than just a pure control deck. The reason being is you make more use out of its 7 attack because it starts to threaten lethal on your opponent, and you're less likely to have taken as much damage in the early game because you're going to be aggressively fighting for the board anyway. Next we have Hunter's Pack, which is a 3-mana Hunter's card, believe it or not. They random Hunter Beast, Secret, and Weapon to your hand. Right, so obvious comparison to this is Master's Call, which is 3 mana, draw 3 beasts from your deck, essentially. This adds 3 cards to your hand, random Hunter Beast, a Secret, and a Weapon. Currently there's only 3 weapons in Hunter, which is Headhunter's Hatchet, Eaglehorn Bow, and Gladiator's Longbow. The first 2 are quite good cards. Longbow is a little bit slow on tempo and a bit late into the game, though if you've played Hunter's Pack, it's usually going to be towards the mid-late game, I'd say. It's not really a card you really want to be playing on turn 3, because you're likely going to be losing tempo from this. So you would probably not that sad if you get Longbow. Something that's nice from this is you're always guaranteed to get a bit of burn damage, and hunters love burn damage because of their hero power. You can just secure a game that way, so you're always guaranteed to get at least a little bit of burn damage from this. In terms of secrets, secrets are all situationally strong, but I think a random secret is not going to be that helpful a lot of the time, depending on your opponent's board state. If it's in the early game, if they got a lot of tokens and stuff, freezing trap's going to be pretty bad. Generally right now the only secret that's being played is Rat Trap, just to prevent some of the massive turns from rogues and warriors and and mages. In terms of hunter beasts, we can have a look at them right now. Actually, look at this. Yeah, we've got like these cards are seeing play already. These will be good pulls because they're quite good for tempo. Mastiff is fine. It's not very great for tempo. It's pretty good for value. Situationally good for getting onto board. Hyena obviously can be okay, but on its own, without the support of Spring Paws or Unleash the Hounds, it's not actually that great. Halazi's a bit slow, Valbrid's a bit slow, Savannah's a bit slow as well. I mean, it's a good card, but it's still slow. And you got King Crush, and then you got a few in the basic set as well, with Timberwolf, and I think Rhino and Starving Buzzard. So Starving Buzzard obviously not very good. You're going to get, pretty often with this, I think, you're going to get a beast which is not very good tempo. One of the upsides of Master's Call was it tended to find you either something that you had used Dire Frenzy on, like a Scale Hide, which was insane, or it found you that Scale Hide to Dire Frenzy, or it found you things like Spring Paw, Timberwolf, and Scavenging Hyena. So although it's a high value card and drawing you 3 cards, you got a huge tempo turn afterwards through something like Timberwolf, Unleash the Hounds, or Unleash the Hounds Hyena, Springpaw Hyena, etc., etc. So although you were taking a turn to find a lot of value, you didn't really lose tempo over the long run. With this card, however, with Hunter's Pack, I think you're going to be losing a lot more tempo. A random Hunter Beast is often going to be unplayable on your next turn, or even if it is playable, it's going to be too slow tempo. While you've spent this 3 mana, your opponent's been developing onto the board. A secret could not be useful. The weapon means maybe you take too much face damage. So yeah, I think although it's a similar value to Master's Call, it's not nearly as strong. Master's Call is consistent. Tempo swings. This is going to be a lot more random and on average a lot slower. I think if you're playing a singleton deck, this definitely makes the cut because you're going to have a lot of cards that you want to play, and you can't really play Master's Call in that deck anyway. But in terms of the standard mid-range Master's Call decks, I don't think this makes the cut. Next up we have Bloodsworn Mercenary. Actually, I just wanted to touch on Hunter's Pack again. Have we seen in the past all these cards which add a bunch of cards to your hand? The only ones that get played are the ones which add high tempo cards to your hand. If you're looking at a Mega Assembly, it adds a bunch of usually rushing mechs or mechs with really powerful battle cries. So that gets played. We're looking at pre-nerf Raiding Party, which tended to add a bunch of 0 mana 3/3 taunts to your hand, essentially, as well as a weapon, which is high tempo. Or we're looking at Master's Call, which we already spoke about. Things like Dragon's Roar, Violet Haze, these cards have not seen play despite being good value engines. It's because the things that they generate are too slow. And I think it might be a similar case with this card. Okay, finally moving on. 3 mana, Bloodsworn Mercenary. Battlecry, choose a damaged friendly minion, summon a copy of it. So 3 mana, 3/3 for Warrior. So this is obviously huge tempo. It's like you're getting a free Faceless Manipulator and a 3 mana, 3/3. It's all for 3 mana if you have a damaged minion. The condition can be somewhat hard to meet, but Warrior has some great tools available to help them do that. One of the biggest ones is Inner Rage, which is a 0 mana activator for this card. You're going to have rush minions that take value trades, and then you can activate this card onto them, and they'll be damaged, and you'll get another rush minion out, which is really powerful. Something like Darius, you can go turn 8 Darius Crowley, value trade that into something, it gets a plus stats, and then you copy the Darius, and that thing trades into something else, and it gets an even bigger buff. That's a huge board swing. Yeah, this card seems really powerful in a tempo style rush, maybe reborn style warrior. Don't know if you want it in the traditional mech control warriors or bomb warriors. I don't think this makes the card. Usually, your damage minion is gonna be pretty much limited to Militia Commander, which often comes down on turn 4 and is dead before you can combo it with this card. You won't get the plus attack on the Militia Commander's rush anyway, so copying it isn't so hot. Yeah, cool card if Tempo Warrior is a thing. This definitely will help it. Like, you can do some disgusting amounts of burn damage with this card if you're running Leroy. Like, if you just go Leroy in a rage plus this, it's a 16 damage burst combo for 8 mana, which is very, very powerful. And yeah, just something like if you have it play a Frothing Berserker on turn 3, like you coin Frothing, and then you'd value trade with it, and then play this, you've got a freaking huge board on turn 3 already. Very threatening one. So yeah, very strong card. Just depends whether Tempo Warrior will be the flagship warrior archetype. Next up we have a new Murloc, Fish Flinger. Sounds like fish finger. Is that a joke? I'm not sure. Anyway, 2 mana 3/2 Battlecry. Add a random Murloc to each player's hand. Right, so this is kind of a generic style Murloc. Adding a random Murloc to each player's hand. Who does that benefit more? Well, if you're running a Murloc deck, you're going to be running Murloc synergy. So if you get a synergy card like War Leader or anything else that benefits from having other Murlocs, it's going to benefit you more than it is your opponent, who's likely not running Murlocs themselves. One of the downsides of this card is if you're against a control deck, you could give them an on-curve play. I mean, you as a Murloc aggro deck, you're likely going to be filling out your mana every turn regardless. If you give your opponent a tool in their hand not to float their mana, it's a huge benefit for them and not really a benefit for you. Obviously, this is a little bit of refill for yourself if you're low on cards. There's other ways to do that in Murloc decks, particularly if you're playing a Shaman deck, you have Underbelly Angler, or you have Murloc Tasty Fin to generate cards for yourself as well. I don't think it's the strongest. I think with the next card that we're about to talk about, you might have to end up running it if you're going for a Paladin deck. I don't think this is good enough in Shaman particularly. I think it's going to be helping your opponent more than you think, even though on average a random Murloc helps you more than your opponent. I think just giving them the way to fill in the curve is a bit of a problem when you, as an aggressive Murloc deck, are usually going to be spending every little bit of your mana for the first 5 turns, no problem. Okay, the next card is Tip the Scales, 8 mana, summon 7 Murlocs from your deck. Wow, so this is a huge tempo tool if you can meet the condition, and the condition is having at least 7 Murlocs in your deck at that time. So when you get to 8 mana, you've drawn a bunch of cards from your deck, at least like 7 or 8 from your natural card draw. So you're gonna have to build your deck in a way where you have a huge amount of Murlocs. I'm talking something like 16 Murlocs plus in your deck, which typically isn't happening even for Murloc Shaman, and they have 2 powerful class Murlocs in the form of Underbelly and Sludge Slurper. Paladin doesn't have access to that right now. They could get some class Murlocs in this set, we don't know. So yeah, you're running a deck with like 16 or so Murlocs just to make sure that this is active on turn 8. Maybe you run 2 of these cards just so it's that powerful you get on turn 8, but usually the second one won't work as well as the first one. Getting a full board of 7 Murlocs is super powerful. They have synergies within each other. The only problem is it doesn't really affect the board that much. The only thing that does is really Bluegill Warrior, which is the 2-mana 2/1 charge. Everything else doesn't have Taunt, doesn't have Rush or anything like that. So you're just basically putting a bunch of stats onto the board, and if your opponent is ahead on board, they can just ignore it and go face and kill you. Or if you're playing against a control deck, they can just AoE this away, and you haven't really got too much out of it. Another synergy with this is with Prismatic Lens. If you're running only this as your spell in your deck, Prismatic Lens is going to fetch this card and swap it with another card in your deck. And if you're running a bunch of Murlocs, a lot of them are going to be very cheap. So you could like potentially cheat this out for 5 or 6 mana, or on your turn 5 or 6 essentially, and it's going to be very powerful that way. One of the problems I think with this card is that, at least currently in Paladin, there isn't very good Murlocs for the most part. Shaman has better ones in Sludge Serpent and Underbelly Angler, so you're limited essentially to running a huge amount of neutral Murlocs, and you have to make it to turn 8. And I think what's going to happen a lot of the time is you're going to lose the board completely before turn 8 and die, because you're running a subpar deck full of a bunch of neutral Murlocs. There's way better ways to out-tempo that available to other classes, and when that does happen, all you're going to be drawing every turn is another Murloc and another Murloc, and that's not going to be able to get you back on board. Murloc Shaman right now has access to better tempo tools than the neutral Murlocs, and when that deck gets off the board, it never comes back. It's going to be an even bigger problem if you're running Murloc Paladin. So very, very powerful effect, but the deck building limitation might be too painful in that you're going to be losing games before turn 8 just because you don't have great tempo tools available in your Murloc deck. Also, if you're running the Prismatic Lens strategy to try and cheat this out early, you can't run Crystology in your deck, which actually works pretty well with Murlocs, because you have Murloc Tidecooler, you have the new Mermy card, a bunch of 1-attack Murlocs that you want to be drawing with that. And you can't do that with the Prismatic Lens, because the Prismatic Lens is going to hit the Crystology far too often, and it's going to be too much of a downside. Yeah, very powerful card if you could use it in a vacuum, but I think the deck building limitation is going to make this not very good. Finally, we have the Rogue Legendary that was painstakingly revealed over an hour, getting sand really slowly taken away from it. Anchor the Buried, 5 mana, 5/5, Battlecry, change each Death Rattle minion in your hand into a 1/1 that costs 1. So this is an incredibly powerful effect. Huge amount of tempo from this. Death Rattles, a lot of the value is just put into the Death Rattle effect. The initial body isn't that impactful, or at least if you're playing this card, you can choose the Death Rattles which have most of their value in their Death Rattle. There's some combos you can do with this with Mecha'thun. Myra's Unstable Elements lets you draw to the end of your deck, play this on your Mecha'thun, play the rest of your cards, which can be very cheap in Rogue with things like Prep, Backstab, Shadow Step, etc. And then you can kill your Mecha'thun with your 1 mana Mecha'thun with like a Backstab or something. That's potential. I'm not sure if that's going to be that good. Rogue doesn't have access to great AoE tools or survivability tools, and the Myra's itself has an innate failure rate in that if it doesn't draw this card or Mecha'thun, it has to draw them both essentially. It's just going to completely fail, and you're going to lose that way. So I'm not sure on the Mecha'thun Rogue front, but otherwise, in just a normal Death Rattle Rogue, this card's incredibly powerful. Something like Mechanical Whelp becomes incredibly busted with this card, turns into 1 mana 1/1 version of Mechanical Whelp, which is essentially pretty much the same card but for 1 mana. And then you can use things like Necrium Vile on it on turn 6 to get 2 7/7s out with the Mechanical Whelp, which is huge amounts of tempo. So things like Violet Haze might be really strong with this card. I was talking a little bit before when we were talking about Hunter's Pack how Violet Haze is not very good because the value that it generates is really slow tempo. It's very especially true with Violet Haze because the Death Rattle effects, which are slow anyway. With this card, it changes it because you want to just add as many Death Rattles to your hand. When they become 1 mana 1/1s with their full value Death Rattle, they suddenly turn from really slow cards to really fast cards. So the value you get for 2 mana Violet Haze becomes a really good tempo as well. So I think Violet Haze will be played with this card. Death Rattle Rogue was a viable deck for a little bit of time actually when cubes were around. And the weapon's still around, which was very strong, like being able to activate Death Rattles. I think this card could actually see a resurgence. You can still run a lot of the tempo tools that Rogue's doing right now with Evil Miscreant, etc., and just fit the Death Rattle package in there as well. I think this is really going to help. A card which works incredibly well with this is Magic Carpet, actually. Magic Carpet has synergy with lackeys and stuff, which Rogue naturally runs anyway. But when you've played this card on your Death Rattles, being able to rush them in to things and activate the Death Rattles quickly is going to be even more tempo. So I anticipate the Magic Carpet might be experimented with, might see main deck play within this Death Rattle Rogue build. Obviously the deck would be quite dependent on this card being drawn, but a lot of decks are like that. So I think this is probably a viable strategy for Rogue. I don't know if it's going to be the strongest, but it's cool to see the Death Rattle synergies getting a bit of love. Alright, that's it for now. Stay tuned for more reveals. There's going to be lots of cards coming out, so I'm going to try and do these quick reviews and get my opinions out there as quick as I can. Stay tuned for more. Follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/JambreHS, and stay tuned for more of these. See you later.